Today's data shows that 1,129,907 tests for coronavirus have now been carried out in the United Kingdom, including 105,937 tests carried out yesterday. 182,260 people have tested positive. That's an increase of 4,806 cases since yesterday. 14,695 people are currently in hospital with coronavirus, down 15,111 from the previous day. And sadly, of those tested positive for coronavirus across all settings, 28,131 have now died. That's an increase of 621 fatalities since yesterday. These are heartbreaking losses for every family affected, and all our thoughts and prayers are with their families and their friends. Jenny will provide an update on the latest data on coronavirus. But first, as Communities Secretary, I want to update on the steps we're taking to protect some of the most vulnerable people in our society. As the Prime Minister set out this week, we've now passed the peak of the virus, and he will provide more details on how we will address the second phase of this battle next week. We all know that the restrictive measures, as necessary and as life-saving as they are difficult for everyone. All of you watching at home this afternoon have made sacrifices, big and small, and I want to thank you once again for all that you're doing. You're helping us as a country to turn the tide on the virus. But for some in our society, these measures involve sacrifices that none of us would wish anyone to bear. For victims of domestic abuse, it means being trapped in a nightmare. The true evil of domestic abuse is that it leaves vulnerable people, including children, living in fear in the very place where they should feel most safe and secure, inside their own home. Though domestic violence can leave physical marks, the true extent of the inflicted pain is much deeper than those marks. It can be invisible. These are emotional scars, and scars that for some will never heal, and which can even pass to the next generation, whose young eyes see things that they never should, and hear things that none of us would wish our children to witness. As a father of 3 girls, I cannot even imagine women and young children being put in this situation, but they are, and we must be alive to the reality of what is happening in all too many homes across the country. I want us to defend the rights of those women and those children wherever we can, and that is what we're going to do. And this is not a crime inflicted solely on women. It affects men too. This government has already prioritised tackling domestic abuse. The Domestic Abuse Bill, which had its second reading in Parliament last week, is a landmark piece of legislation which will create the first ever legal definition of domestic abuse. And this is important because it holds those responsible to account and gives those suffering at the hands of others more confidence that action will be taken and perpetrators brought to justice. Today, I can confirm that through the Domestic Abuse Bill, the government will also be ensuring that the victims of domestic violence get the priority need status that they need to access local housing services much more easily. This is a fully funded commitment which will mean that no victim of domestic violence has to make the unbearable choice between staying somewhere that they know is unsafe or becoming homeless. This government has been clear that we are determined to break the silence that surrounds victims, to stamp out the stigma and to strengthen our support for survivors. We've already announced an extra £15 million to strengthen our support, and an extra £16 million is going directly to refuge services. But we recognise the extra pressures that are being created due to COVID-19, and that necessitates more support. While the necessary social distancing measures remain in place, it is harder than before for victims of domestic abuse to reach out to their friends, to their family, to colleagues and to neighbours for the support that they urgently need. Today, I can announce a package of over £76 million in new funding to support the most vulnerable in society during the pandemic. This funding will help charities support survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. It will support vulnerable children and their families, and it will support victims of modern slavery. This additional support will ensure more safe spaces and accommodation for survivors of domestic abuse and their children, and the recruitment of additional counsellors for victims of sexual violence. And this funding will also help frontline charities to be able to offer different ways of supporting those in need, including virtual or phone-based services. We know that some refuges have had to reduce or even to cancel the services that they would want to provide during the pandemic. This funding will help them to meet the challenges posed in this national emergency and to continue to help those that desperately need support. I'd like to say a word of thanks to domestic abuse charities who are doing so much at this time to help so many people. The Women's Aid Refuge in my constituency is one example, and I'd like to thank Marlene and her amazing team in Newark. People like that do incredible work and deserve all our thanks and gratitude now more than ever before. Where refugees don't have enough capacity to support those in need during the pandemic, some have asked us if they could use hotels or other accommodation nearby on a temporary basis. For example, as move-on accommodation where they judge it to be safe and appropriate to do so. We will work with refugees to make this option available to them if they judge it to be the right one where it's necessary.